this bit of the band. Now, if you decode this bit of the band, which is what this body does, then that's your world. That's your everything, if you're just only aware of that. And so we have a global population that is constantly programmed to read a certain band, and then only some of that band within it. And through that, they are manipulating us to see self and the world in very minute, limited terms. When if we just opened our minds to consciousness, we would then start going further and further into the band and getting more and more insights, more and more knowledge, more and more awareness, and suddenly we'll see what's going on. And it seems to me that transhumanism is the next stage on from that, where they go the next stage into locking us into this robotic cyborg state, so that we are even beyond the limitations that we are now, to the point where basically you are born a robot, you live a robot, and you die a robot, with less and less impact on the conscious self, on perceptions, on behavior, on actions. And if we get to that point, which is what they want, there's a guy in Britain, a very strange man called Professor Warwick. He's famous for being implanted. He's at Reading University for being implanted so he can turn the frickin' television on and off with his arm and all this crap. And he once said, what's the problem with loving your servitude? What is the problem with having basically technological connections which are feeding you a sense of happiness, so that you're always happy? He said this guy's an academic in Britain. And of course what he's talking about, Max, is Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, love your servitude. The idea is to create this well, I almost said part human, very little part human, certainly almost nothing part consciousness, stroke technological being, which is nothing more than a servant of a system. And not only does it serve the system, it likes serving the system because it's being fed information telling it that it's happy to serve the system. I mean, it's beyond science fiction where these people want to go, but that's where they want to go. And the only answer to it is consciousness, is to break out before we get into this cyborg, part biological computer, part technological computer. Break out of this perception control that we have now, the level we do now, before it gets into that level, because they want to move towards that very quickly.
You don't have to wonder about the singularity to see remarkable changes coming from technology. Look at today and how remarkable technology is, and it's hardly stopping.
There's an unanswered question of how far can you go and still be human?
Technology is surely a wonderful thing, but by the same token, there can be no denying that via the manipulation of what technologies are released to the public based on their ability to generate income, rather than on the true benefits they hold, then the more technology man acquires, the more disconnected from the earth he seems to become. And it must also be clearly understood that technology itself is not the problem. Technology has most certainly been of huge benefit to our society, and it is nothing to be scared of. However, it needs to be kept in balance and used as a service to mankind. But what actually is transhumanism? What does it really mean? The transhumanist dream is perhaps best summed up by Ray Kurzweil at the close of his film Transcendent Man. And as positive and beneficial as the idea is presented to the viewer as being, the underlying tone is of the gradual assimilation of all life upon the earth, and indeed the entire universe, into one huge nano-machine, whereby the universe will become intelligent, as if it wasn't already, and at which point man himself will have created the machine god transhumanists believe human consciousness will ultimately become.
In the future, everything will become intelligent. Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent computers. So at that point, we're going to expand out into the rest of the universe. We'll be sending basically nanotechnology infused with artificial intelligence. Swarms of those will go out into the universe and basically find other matter and energy that we can then harness to expand the overall intelligence of our human-machine civilization. So the universe will wake up, it'll become intelligent, and that will multiply our intelligence trillions of trillions fold. You know, we can't really fully contemplate. And that's really the main reason this is called the singularity. But regardless of what you call it, it will be the universe waking up. So does God exist? Well, I would say not yet.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
One must truly ask, is this the direction mankind should really be heading? But even more importantly is the question of whether mankind is actually being given any choice in the matter. And if the answer is no, then the next question is how might such a thing as the global implementation of the transhumanist agenda as outlined by Kurzweil actually be achieved without the knowledge of the general population?
Biotech is an exploding frontier. It is clever enough and small enough to enter and change our very cells. When nanobiotech has a firm footing in us, it will be easy to upgrade and downgrade anyone and anything in any way. Oliver Curry, an evolutionist at the London School of Economics, predicted in 2007, the human race will one day split into two separate species, an attractive, intelligent ruling elite and an underclass of dim-witted, ugly, goblin-like creatures.
Technology is only ever as dangerous as the mind of whomever wields it. And if those who hold the reins of power in this world can in any way be appraised according to their track record, then for the bulk of mankind, transhumanism presents itself as a very dire future indeed. If it were possible to achieve the dream of people such as Ray Kurzweil and create a world where even the plants and rocks were fused with intelligent nanotechnology, how might such a thing be done? Very notably and quite obviously due to their microscopic size, the prospect of doing so without the knowledge of a vast amount of the population must be seen as utterly plausible. But how could such a mammoth undertaking be implemented? What delivery system could be employed to ensure the widest and most effective method of reaching the subject population? The phenomenon known to the alternative research community as chemtrails, and referred to by the British and United States governments as geoengineering or climate remediation, is perhaps one of the most controversial topics on the table today. Even though the practice of climate remediation is widely admitted to by governments, there are many who remain sceptical. And generally the two main questions brought up by those who are opposed to the concept are, one, if there was any truth to the idea, then why would the perpetrators be spraying themselves? And two, the phenomenal cost of such an enormous undertaking.
People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail.
This is of interest not just in this country, but European countries and frankly all over the world. A lot of folks interested in it.
We take geoengineering to mean deliberate, large-scale intervention in the Earth's system. The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality and do this in just a jet in a very simple way. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue.
Because nanoparticulates are potentially self-replicating, the cost of producing them is actually quite negligible. As for the question as to why the perpetrators would be spraying themselves, well, that answer is in fact a very simple one. These people want transhumanism. In fact, when one truly considers the transhumanist agenda and it begins to sink in that chemtrails seem to consist of nanoparticulates or smart dust, then the last piece of the puzzle falls snugly into place. And it is far from inconceivable that were the global population to be infused with programmable nanoparticulates, then when these tiny machines are switched on, they will simply do what they are programmed to do. And that what this may be may also be largely due to what other genetic codes have first been introduced into the host.
We have more than tripled the numbers of doses of vaccines we're giving our children in the last quarter century.
Up to 15 by the age of 6.
Why are so many highly vaccinated children so sick?
The elites, those who can afford to carry out practices such as chemtrails, generally don't eat processed or genetically altered food, and it is extremely unlikely that they are subject to the same rigorous vaccination regime as the general public. If mankind is indeed ingesting nanoparticulates without their general knowledge, then how might such machines be controlled or switched on? In answer to this question, one only needs to realize that it is now a long-established fact that when anything occurs within the human experience, ultimately the information travels around the body electromagnetically. All our 5 senses, along with any emotional information, is all interpreted by the brain via these electromagnetic signals. Therefore, it is also an established fact that man can be influenced and even controlled via electromagnetism.
Metallic salts have made our air conductive. This means that we and everything around us can transmit and propagate energy. The air is no longer neutral.
I think the smart meter is a very good move for the company, just for the customer aspect. I mean, they can keep more real-time information on a day-to-day basis.
The huge awakening that has been seen in recent times leaves little doubt that mankind and consciousness itself is in a state of evolution. But there also exists compelling evidence suggesting that there are certain forces at work who wish to control the direction this evolution will take.
The second group of materials found in these environmental samples is unidentifiable fibers. And I really want you to appreciate the meaning of unidentifiable. These fibers have been sent to sophisticated laboratories, and there is nothing in the databases that match them. These are fibers, we could say, that do not exist in nature. People around the world are developing lesions on their skin that ooze and produce fibers. This is known as Morgellons syndrome. Tissue samples cultured from ordinary people without this ailment contain and grow the very same fibers. When these fibers are cultured, they produce colonies of filaments. You can see the extension filaments. And these colonies continue to grow and reproduce, branching out into more filaments and more colonies. The filament cultures can be grown from saliva samples, tissue from the skin, mucus, urine, blood, from animals and people, regardless of the presence of the Morgellons condition. So where do these fibers or filaments come from? Airborne environmental samples that were collected by Clifford Carnicom in 2000, the year 2000, gathered at high altitude on a mountain in New Mexico, showed the presence of those fibers, whose structure matches exactly the tubular filaments showing up in our blood, tissues, and skin. Additionally, the samples collected by Mr. Carnicom showed what he calls, and was called in biology, desiccated erythrocytes. This is a multisyllabic term, but it means dried red blood cells. So, why are dried red blood cells in the air?
See, nanocells are real small, 1,000 times smaller than these dust particulates. You inhale it, they go to work replicating, spreading like a virus, multiplying in exponentials. 6 months' time, I could have 100 million people. Converted ditch diggers, porn stars, and presidents. Not one would be the wiser. 100 million people who buy what I want them to buy and do pretty much damn well anything I figure they ought to do.
Those unidentifiable filaments, he has observed the formation of red blood cells and submicron-sized structures. So now you've got a filament making its own red blood cells. The engineered cells, the red blood, very, very tough, withstanding excesses of heat and chemicals, indicating that they are designed to endure almost anything. He has put them in a Bunsen flame, he has poured bleach on them, acid, and they still endure. In addition, they are able to replicate, growing outside of the body in a petri dish. This is highly sophisticated technology going on by itself, not in a laboratory. People with advanced Morgellons syndrome started with fibers coming out of their skin, and they're now observing very strange crystalline forms and metallic devices, plaque structures, even grooved metallic devices. On the right, you'll see one device, the front and the back. The fiber strands that you see here were made of cellulose and GNA. GNA is DNA's chemical cousin. It's a nanotechnology building block. The nanostructures contain additional properties not found in DNA, including the ability to form mirror image structures. Here you have a nanoarray, a tiny device used in biotech for DNA hybridization. And on the left, you see a diagram from an industry website of a nanoarray. And on the slide, you can see actually two of them. She's marked them with red X's that came out of her body, looking exactly like this. So, we begin with the emergence of basic filaments, followed by more complex structures. So what processes are going on here? Are these materials combining to form devices that are working together inside us? What is happening to our biology? And remember that tissue samples obtained from ordinary people who have no Morgellons symptoms, no lesions, can be cultured to produce the very same filaments found in people with Morgellons. So we would have to conclude that Morgellons is like the canary in the coal mine, and that only some people are exuding the materials. And could that be because their bodies are rejecting it, while our bodies are integrating it?
There has been a force that is mostly unseen in control of this planet for an extremely long time. And evidence very much suggests that this force is attempting to manipulate the evolution of human consciousness that is currently taking place. It is very likely the same force that first reduced mankind to the impaired state we now find ourselves in, where our pineal gland is closed, thereby cutting us off from our higher senses, and where our DNA is 97% dormant, whereby each person is reduced to operating to only 3% of their actual capability. When one examines the evidence, and steps back to take in the entire picture, there can be no doubt that the vast majority of human beings live their lives quite literally in a socially and biologically induced trance. And it is due to this trance-like state of the people that we now find the world in such a degraded state. Therefore, the solution becomes clear. Mankind must awaken. But how? How do we transform the collective human trance into wakefulness? How do we bring about the mass awareness of the people? And what steps can be taken to allow both humanity and the earth to once again return to a natural state of abundance? Clearly, the first step is for people to understand and accept the truth regarding the current condition of mankind and the urgency of addressing the situation we are faced with. But even when people know the truth, as many do, most are simply waiting for social or financial Armageddon, waiting for December 21st, 2012, waiting for ascension or waiting for the rapture. And due to this lack of positive and decisive action, while people wait for redemption to be delivered to them via an outside source, the destructive machine of modern civilization continues to grind slowly forward towards its inevitable conclusion. Obviously, it is extremely important for mankind to truly grasp the depths of the problems we are facing and to the peril that our collective failure to deal with things has placed us in. And this peril includes not only the human race, but the entire earth and all life upon it. Because if mankind allows the ship of state to continue sailing in its current direction, within possibly 3 to 5 generations, we are very likely to have allowed the creation of a world that will no longer support life as we know it.
There's an incredible disconnect between reality and what we're fed as reality, such as this little electronic box that millions upon billions of homes have now, and we now digest all of our reality from this little electronic tube. None of what we're actually getting in this tube is reality other than the fact that we're watching television. That's it. That's the only portion of that that's actually real. But what we do is we lose ourselves then. We almost become too identified. We forget that we're even existent, so we are identified with everything that we're seeing, and this becomes our reality. And we forget that not only is this cherry-picked information, but above and beyond all that, no one even stops to think that this is somebody's interpretation of what happened in an area. So everything that we're getting is literally somebody else's creation. It's a manufactured idea that's put into this little tube and then projected into us as reality. And that now is the basis for how we act in our society. So the way we dress, the way we talk, what we do, what we're afraid of, what we're attracted to, what we want to drive, the house that we want, the money, all of these things are driven by somebody else's perception. They're driven mostly by wants of other people, and they arrived at those wants from other people. And it all comes back to really just the fundamental basis that none of this is reality. It's manufactured. It's not really pertinent to our life. It's not really profound. There's really no importance to it. We're just applying value to it because all of these things, the clothing and the cars and the job and the money in the bank account and why we want this job, we don't even understand why anymore because we relate all of our wants, all of our desires to what these other people want and what they desire. And if you actually get to the core of it, we don't even truly want these things. We just want the other people around us to see that we have what they want because that gives us a measure of control or a measure of power. And it all boils down to a level of security. And that's all that all of this really is the fact that people are following these fashions they don't understand. They're following these ideals that they don't understand. They're doing it because they want to fit into some identity that they're eventually creating for themselves to be the most secure, the most powerful, the most prominent, the most beautiful, the most affluent person in that field so that everybody else around will give that person support because they want to be near you. And that's all it is. We just want this closeness. We want this connection with people. And unfortunately now we are contriving it. We're forcing people to want a connection with us for means that really have no basis in love, no basis in real relationships. So all of our relationships are based upon power and fear, and based upon manipulation and lies and trying to get this and trying to get that, and none of it's true interaction anymore.
Science is great